We need a place, she said, just for us. It would be so secret that we would never tell anyone in the whole world about it. She lowered her voice almost to a whisper. It might be a whole secret country, she continued, and you and I would be the rulers of it.
Hi, Dayelle.
Hi, Amanda.
So, if you're like any other adolescent, we're taking it way back to childhood here, and today we're doing Bridge to Terabithia, which, right off the bat, I'm just going to say before I dive into the cocktail, such a pinnacle, important book for me growing up. The 2007 movie is just chef's kiss. I loved it.
Just make sure you have a box of tissues.
A box. No. Make sure you're sponsored by Kleenex.
Yeah.
Kleenex, if you're listening, Watch Our Video would love a sponsorship.
Yeah, we would.
And I'm trying to think of a cocktail, right, for this one. And I'm like,
It's tricky because it's also a kid's book.
It's kids, right?
Yeah.
But there's this line that, so Jess drew the way some people would drink whiskey. The piece would start at the top of his muddled brain and seep through his tired and tensed up body. So today we're drinking the Poetry of the Trees, which is just a little whiskey, neat in a cup, full of your tears. That's it.
Appropriate.
Because I don't remember if it was your idea or my idea. Then we were talking about ideas to do for the podcast, and we thought of this one. It is so sad. First of all, we are on a string of emotion, folks.
Yeah,
like all of these episodes have been so sad.
Yeah.
But this one is, first of all, a very controversial book. This is a banned book all the time because there is a death in the book. But Catherine Patterson, who wrote this book, this is based on the true story of her son's best friend that was struck by lightning when they were 8 and died.
Yeah.
Her son, David. So, who oddly enough, I love this so much. He went on to write the screenplay for the 2007 movie.
Yeah,
which
I had
is
seen
just,
that. That's
so
incredible.
Beautiful. But this was required reading for our school, so everybody read it. I think I get wanting to shelter your children, and I'm not a parent, so please speak on this, but I get wanting to shelter your child from hard conversations and strong emotions, but there are little kids out there who are losing their best friends.
So, and I think that's like a beautiful way to kind of start this all out. So the book was published in 1977. And to me, this book was so ahead of its time with diving into an area with kids that you just don't, it's kind of like the elephant in the room. You don't talk about it. And I think it does such a beautiful job of exploring the emotions a child would go through if this is what happened to them. And like any death in anyone's lives, death is so hard to explain to anyone. It's hard for us as adults to understand it. So to have this book touch on these things, that is such a delicate area in a child's life. It is so beautifully done. Like, I really appreciate not only the book's way of handling it, but the movie's way of handling it.
Yeah.
They're very, very similar, obviously, because the son was the one that wrote the screenplay. But I think, like, there's a definite right way to handle the situation, and it is done so beautifully. And like it allows the kids, obviously in this story it's Jess, he feels so many different feelings, which is so true to grieving someone that you lose, especially at such a young age where you don't understand the concept of someone dying. Like you know, and in the book, like he goes to sleep and he wakes up and he's just like, you know, goes down, his mom's making pancakes. He thinks like nothing happened. Like
it's a bad dream.
He's just going to go meet Leslie and play in the backyard and all that. So obviously we kind of jumped right into the saddest part of this book, but the relationship between the two main characters in this book is just the sweetest, most like
innocent.
It's so, I just love it. And I don't know if you pick up on this in the movie. I think because I hadn't read the book. I had seen the movie, but it had been years.
Okay.
So I probably saw it soon after it had come out. I had not read the book until just recently. And I bawled. The end of chapter 10. I wasn't expecting it to happen when it happened in the book. Again, I had seen the movie, so I knew that it was coming. But for some reason, I just wasn't prepared. And I literally, I was cleaning and I had to, because I was listening to the audiobook for this one, and I had to stop and just literally sob it out, continue listening to chapter 11, which is still just sweet Jessie going through the motions of she's not dead. This is not real. This is not reality. She's just going to come around the corner and we're going to go to Terabithia. And it is when you just need a good cry.
I'm going to cry. I'm already crying listening to Dayelle because this book is just so important to my childhood. I was going through such really, really, really bad stuff at this time. I think I read it in 4th grade, maybe 3rd or sometime between 3rd and 5th grade. I'm an escapist child, right? Just ask my therapist. I'm an escapist adult, right? So hence my obsession with books. When things get too hard, I shut down. When things get too hard, I just put them in a little box. They get packed away and I just don't deal with them, right? So this was helping me to be in that escapism world. And so
that's Jesse's character.
That's his character. And that's Leslie brings that out in him, right? So he's not allowed to be a kid because he's on a farm. He's got to do all the chores. He's the only boy with 4 siblings. He doesn't get to play pretend and use his imagination. And he's drawing all these great characters and animals that, like a shark with a bear's head and all this other stuff, because that's the only bit of imagination he's allowed to use, but he has to hide it.
Yeah.
It's just not welcomed. Yeah. So she makes a reference, Catherine Patterson makes a reference to Chronicles of Narnia, right? And so Chronicles of Narnia was another series that really just helped me get out of these, get away from the bad things that were happening to me. And she says that just like Chronicles of Narnia, she wanted another book that would have an imaginary kingdom similar to that, and said she thought that she had made Terabithia up, and then she reread in 2005. She reread The Voyage of the Dawn Treader by C.S. Lewis, which is part of the Chronicles of Narnia series, and realized that she got Terabithia from her imagination while reading that book.
It. Yeah, and
that just goes to show you how freaking important imagination is. It's not just huge. In kids, in adults too.
Yes.
We lose that so quickly. It's the first thing that goes with your childhood. It's your innocence and your imagination. Your imagination goes, and adults, they kind of beat it out of you in the sense of you're too old for that now.
Right.
We're not playing pretend. You're too old for that now. Just like Jess.
What's the one line that Jess's dad says to him?
Oh my God, stop.
In the movie.
Stop. Why don't you draw me some money?
Yeah. That would be helpful.
That would be helpful. Get your head of the clouds and draw me some money. And back to chapters 10 and 11, when I say cry, so we did this a lot as kids. We had woods and a creek and mountains behind our house, and we just spent all of our time back there.
Yeah.
And that's what I would do for my little sisters. We'd create these fake places. And my dad, divorced parents, my dad would be like, yeah, here's some hammer and nails and some wood. Just go build yourself a fort. You know, building forts in the woods was that was the thing, right? The best thing in the world. And I want to say it exact, but there's the part in the book where it's the very end and Jess realizes that Terabithia isn't his anymore.
Yeah.
It's Maybelle's now.
Yeah.
And he says, when I say cry, I'm sobbing. Every time I read this, and when you had gotten to the part, you're like, oh my God. No!
I can't.
But she says to him, I don't want Joyce Ann to know about this. That's the baby. And he's like, you might want to tell Joyce Ann sometime. And then she said, I'll tell Joyce Ann a secret that's just between you and me. And the idea seemed to horrify her. Yeah, I was just thinking about it. And then she, whines because Joyce Ann's a baby.
Yeah.
And he says, well, she wouldn't likely be a queen first. You'd have to train her. Queen? Who gets to be the queen? I'll explain it when I finish. And when he finished, he put flowers in her hair, led her across the bridge, the great bridge into Terabithia, which might look to someone with no magic in him like a few planks across a nearly dry gully. Shh, he said, look. Where? You can't see him? All the Terabithians standing on tiptoe to see you. Me? Shh. Yes, there's a rumor going around that the beautiful girl arriving today might be the queen they've been waiting for. Oh, my God. It just destroys me. Oh, my God.
So it's funny, like, hearing you read this. Obviously, like, I have to hold back tears, but I am just...
We're not holding them back.
I'm just envisioning, like, the last scene in the movie where he's walking across the bridge that he just made.
And she gets the magic in her.
And it's just, like, it starts to change in front of her eyes. And I'm just like...
It's like just like this wooden bridge with twigs that he builds for her, and then all of a sudden it's like gold, and
it's just stunning. And like her face, she's like, but she doesn't see the actual kingdom. And then she's like, wait, what about purple flowers? And you see the purple flowers that start to appear. And
then he says, which is Leslie's line to him, close your eyes, but keep your mind wide open.
Yes.
And it is just... Oh, my God.
It's everything. And I think this is a perfect way to jump into one of my favorite characters, aside from the two main characters, is Miss Edmonds.
Miss Edmonds, yes.
Played by...
Zooey Deschanel.
I mean, like, you could not... Like, she's literally...
Perfection.
You couldn't pick a better actress to play this role.
Were you happy about the fact that... So this book is based in the 70s. Obviously, This is when the tragedy struck in her life.
Yeah.
So she wrote this book to be based in the 70s. But in the movie, it's more modern time. I would say early 2000s.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Zooey Deschanel.
Yeah. She's
Perfect.
I think that there's like a slight difference from the book to the movie in that essence too, because there's no, like, in the book, Jesse's always milking the cow.
Poor Miss Bessie.
That's a big part of the plot. And then obviously in the movie, there is no milking the cow. They have a greenhouse, and that's
lots
kind of like what they take. Yeah. But I just loved her. I love her character. And like the fact that he is so in love with her. It's that sweet, sweet, quiet boy who is just enamored by his beautiful teacher.
Who's artistic and thinks his artistic nature is something to be embarrassed about and he'd be picked on.
Yeah.
And she sees his drawings and she's just like, no, you're actually really talented.
Yeah.
And in the book, it happens the year before. So he's so excited to go back to school because she's the music teacher and he's going to see her.
Yeah.
And he can't wait to.
He loves her.
But in the movie, he like sees her for probably not the first time. You don't really know if it's the first time, but he is just so in love with her. And Leslie sees him like gawking at her and she's like, take a picture. It lasts longer. And, her character is so important. But I do think you can tell they like suspend a little of what would be happening even in the early 2000s. In the 70s, you could get away with it.
Yeah.
In the early 2000s, I don't think a teacher is calling a child on Saturday and saying, let me take you into Washington, D.C. to go to some museums.
Yeah, that's...
Probably not.
No, probably not happening.
Probably not happening.
By themselves?
Probably not.
No.
But she also is doing it, like if we take that off the table, and it was the 70s and it's okay, she's doing it because she sees this kid needs to know that there's more to art than just being frivolous and drawing in books. There is so much beauty in art, and she wants to show him a world he's not going to see if he never leaves.
See it. I also love the moment when they're at the museum and he starts to kind of go into a panic because they're going to get something to eat, and he realizes he doesn't have any money. Like, that's a big part of the plot too, is that it's a very poor family. Barely make, the minimum to get through life. And he's at the museum and obviously they're hungry and they're going to get something to eat. And she very quickly is like, no, I'm getting you lunch. And he feels terrible because it costs $3. And he is just like, she's like, no. I want you to understand that I am paying for this and I had full intention to pay.
Yes, like I invited you.
Right. Like, this is my treat. Stop it. And it's just like a very sweet, because he is so adult. Like, the worries and the fears that he has is such an adult part of him, but yet he's so badly wants to just be a kid. And it's
literally my life. Like, that is, I think, why I loved it so much, is because I took on the problems of my family at a very, very young age.
Yeah.
I was well aware of our finances.
Yeah.
I was hyper aware of the, issues within my family. And I think Catherine Patterson does a beautiful job of showing how important it is to let a child be a child.
Yeah.
Like, the minute he found Leslie, his world was just...
It was completely changed forever.
And I do want to kind of talk about the fact that the beauty between a male-female friendship at that age.
Yes.
It is so platonic and it is so important. And just the way they find empathy for that girl that's a bully and they find out that she's being beat by her father. And like in the movie, oh my God, I love this so much in the movie. So it's very similar in the book, right? You know, you find out the girl's being abused by her father, where in the book, the whole 7th grade finds out because she tells her 2 friends and they tell everybody.
Yeah.
And then in
She's
the movie,
crying in the bathroom.
Yeah. In the movie, the cops get called.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody's talking about it. But in the movie, there's this really beautiful scene where they think they're fighting this big troll. Like, you know, like it's a big...
I'm so glad you're bringing that because it was a
Yes.
question I had. Okay,
Yeah,
great,
so they're
great.
fighting this big troll for like weeks,
Yeah.
right? And then they find out that the troll's actually really friendly. And the face on the troll, they think this troll is this big bad monster. But the face that they put on the troll is that of... Is it Janet or Janice?
I think it's Janice.
Of her.
Yeah.
And it's her face, but she's actually a really, really friendly troll. She's just misunderstood.
And she's just, I think she's in so much pain.
She's in so much pain. And let's be honest, when kids have that, this is going to be a weepy episode, folks. But when kids don't have control over anything that's happening to them in their home lives,
right. They try to control things.
They try to control things on the outside.
Absolutely.
And who's going to pick? They're being picked on at home.
Mm-hmm.
They're being beat down at home. Sometimes
being
literally.
beat up. Yeah.
The only way to feel like you have any power, because you have no power as a child.
No.
And she's lost any autonomy she has over herself because her father's so abusive.
Mm-hmm.
And those are usually the bullies. And I'm so grateful that I was raised by a mother who literally said, if they're being mean to you, it's probably because something's going on at home.
Yep.
So just let it go.
I love that because it's something that I constantly remind my child of is if there is someone that is bullying you, something is hurting them in their life that is causing... I can't even...
Oh boy, the video of this one is just going to be... I think the cocktail really adds up.
Yeah, I think like it's really important for kids to understand that someone that is bullying, it no matter what, it doesn't make it okay. But I think it's really important for that kid to understand that the bully is going through something so much worse at home.
Yep. Or
somewhere in their life that this is the only way that they can make themselves feel better. Yep. So all you can do,
give them grace.
Is like take a step back. I know what they're saying, what they're doing is not fair and it's cruel and they shouldn't be doing it, but don't let that be how you come back at them. Like,
of course,
give them grace, give them love.
Like Leslie, she does it whole
exactly
to everybody. And that's another thing is she does a really good job, especially this being set in the 70s, the way that it was. Gender roles do not exist here.
No.
Leslie doesn't wear a dress. She wears pants because she's got what Jess's parents call hippie parents, but they're both writers, right?
Yeah.
So they don't have a TV in their house and she gets made fun of for that. Yeah. And that's how she In
the book, are they both writers though?
In the book, they're both writers. No, I think in the book, the mom's a writer and the dad goes to Washington.
Yeah.
Maybe he's a writer. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But they do say it.
There's
I just
a slight
don't remember.
Difference. Yeah.
But there's almost like a gender role. They just don't exist.
Yeah.
Just to prove that, even in Recess.
Well, and it's even brought up in the movie. I think Jesse says to Leslie at one point, he's like, wow, you're really good at that for a girl. And she goes, wow, you're really good at drawing for a boy.
Yeah, it's so good.
And it's such a good, because then it literally makes him realize oh, wow, okay, yeah, you're right. Like, I shouldn't have said that. Like, there is no gender in these things. Like,
nope.
Why are we putting gender in these things? There isn't.
And there's also the whole beginning of the book, the way it starts is Jesse is training to be the fastest kid in 7th grade, right? So he's practicing running and he runs every day before he has to milk his cow. And then you kind of get the same thing in the movie where he's practicing running.
Yeah.
And then Leslie moves in next door.
Yep.
And the first time he meets her is at school. She's not supposed to be with the boys because they're separated at recess, which is just wild to even think about, right?
Which in the movie, that's not the case.
No, not the case at all.
They're all together.
But they line up to race and she wants to race. And one of the guys that bullies Jessie is like, you can't be here, you're a girl. And so Jessie says, what, are you afraid to be beat by a girl? And that shuts him up.
I love that.
And then he's running and he's beating everyone. And Jessie's like, oh my God, I'm going to do it. I'm the fastest kid in 7th grade. And then he feels this like whoosh of wind. And who beats him just in time? Leslie.
Mm-hmm.
And he hates her to begin with.
Yeah.
And then this beautiful friendship starts to form.
Mm-hmm.
And there's back to the...
Well, she comes, like, he sees her after she comes out of a space and her face is all red and he's like, she was crying.
Yep.
And like...
She gets picked on.
I love the fact that he is like, oh, I want to be there for her. So he kind of like pulls her in. And, obviously that's where the first,
their friendship starts. And there's, back to the emotions that Jess feels. Is he's upset at first, right? Like he's not the fastest kid in 7th grade.
Yeah.
And then she dies. And the first thing he can think is, oh my God, I'm the fastest kid in 7th grade.
Yeah.
And he hates himself for having that thought.
Yeah.
He hates himself for a little bit of him is like, oh, I am the fastest kid in 7th grade. He's excited because that's what he's always wanted.
But it's not.
But then he realizes why he's the fastest kid in 7th grade.
Yeah.
And it just shatters him.
Yeah.
And in the movie, you get that scene where the kid in class, the bully kid says, hey, Jessie, now you're the fastest kid in 7th grade. And in the book, Jessie just punches Maybelle, his little sister, right in the face. And in the movie, he punches the bully, which I'm kind of glad they changed it.
That teacher scene, that's beautiful.
Beautiful.
That's
and they
not in
the
book.
Yeah, it is.
It is?
It's exact in the book.
But it's not from him punching.
No, it's the same day after he comes back. He doesn't punch.
She just talks to him, right?
He refuses to do anything. He just puts his head down on the desk.
Because I was like, I don't remember the punch scene and then that conversation.
No.
So, okay, yeah.
They changed the punch. In the book, it's Maybelle.
It feels right to have that. I'm really glad it
wasn't Maybelle.
Yes,
in
yes.
the movie.
Yes.
But
well, he does push her, but it's,
not nearly as bad as it was in the book.
No.
But she, that's a really important scene, actually, that you bring up, is then when the teacher takes him out into the hall and she's supposed to be like this mean teacher that everyone hates. And then he finds out the reason she's so mean is she's like, when my husband died, everyone told me not to cry.
Yeah, move on.
And
it's going to be
that
over.
You need to forget. And I didn't want to forget. And I wanted to cry. And she says how special Leslie was to her. And she said, and I realized if it's this hard for me, I can't imagine how hard it is for you. And he is just, in the book, he even says, like, I'm so, like, I feel so bad for all the awful things I said about her, his teacher, because he now realizes that, like, it's another layer of growth for him to realize, like, oh, people have pain.
Yeah.
Just like Janet's.
Yes.
I forget what her name is. But just like her. People are the way they are because of the pain that they've experienced. Mm-hmm. And like, my God, the heartbreak in that scene that teacher has in the book and the movie, I think she did so perfectly.
And isn't that too in the book? He then is like thinking about the fact that he wants to like write a letter to her saying someday, that like Leslie always loved you as a teacher, like you were a great teacher to her, even
if it wasn't true, because he wants her to to know she made a difference.
And he's like, God, I think and he says, like, because I think Leslie would be okay with that. Like, she'd be okay with me doing that. And it's just like, there's just so much of those moments, even with, like, obviously after she dies, there's that scene where they go into the house and there's all these people in the house and the dog runs right up to Jessie and like is happy to see her. And no one really knows who this kid is at first. And then, of course, the mom and dad come right over to him. And the dad is just like, Leslie loved you.
In the book, when he said the dad was hugging him so hard, it was squishing a button into his forehead and he wanted to move, but he knew that it was important for Bill to have that hug.
Yeah.
And it seemed like he really needed it because he was shaking up and down and he thought he was crying.
Yeah.
And just, I think one of my favorite things about this book is that she wrote exactly the way it is as when you're a child and you're thinking these things and you don't understand them and you don't know why you're doing the things that you're doing, but you're doing them because you're like, I think this is what you're supposed to do.
Right.
I think this is what we do. And we didn't even talk about the dog.
Well, and also that scene I think is really important because his whole thing is he wants to go to see her one last time.
And he thinks she's going to be laid out.
And then finds out that she was cremated. And so he'll never get to see her again. And that's when he goes back into like the denial of like, nope, she's not dead. Like, I'm going to go to Terabithia and she's going to be there.
In the movie, he looks at Mrs. Edmonds.
I know.
And says,
she's not there in the book, right?
She's not there in the book.
That
but in the
moment,
movie, he looks at her and she says, Jessie. And he says, Miss Edmonds, next time we go to the museum, I think Leslie should come. We should ask Leslie to come. I think she'll really like it. And I just...
Literally, I'm already sobbing at this point, like during the movie. And I am just like, it just won't stop. Because I think it's so real. Like, it's such a real way for this little boy to be processing what he's feeling, and like all of these little moments that happen, it's just so beautifully done. Like, it's just, I don't know. Again, I think like she was so ahead of her time. Like, this author just, and maybe it was because she was a mom and she had a son.
She wrote this
who
for
went
her son.
through this process.
I read a speech that she did when she accepted her Newbery Medal for this book. Mm-hmm. I'll read some excerpts from it in a little bit so that you can like hear kind of like why she wrote it. And like, it's really, really interesting. But I do, you know me, I just want to talk about the dog for a second.
Yeah.
But in the book,
That's
because
so
he's
sweet.
so poor, the dad gives him $1 for each one of his sisters to get them a present, right?
For Christmas.
Mm-hmm. He's freaking out because he needs to get
Barbie
Leslie
doll.
an incredible gift, and he can't because him and the other two sisters, they're pooling their $1 each to get a Barbie for Maybelle.
Yeah.
It's just like, it's like the sweetest little thing.
Also, that casting is perfection.
But he can't figure out what to get that's going to be special enough because he thinks it's supposed to be expensive. And they're on the school bus one day and he jumps off the bus and lies to the school bus driver and says, nope, I have to run an errand for my mom. Let me off here. But it's because he sees a box of puppies on the side of the road that says free puppies. And he gets one and he brings it and gives it to Leslie because she said she always wanted a dog. And they name it the Prince of Terabithia.
He's a troll hunter.
And he's a troll hunter. And it's so sad because at the end, when she passes, the dad says, I meant to give you Prince Terrian, but I just can't give him up. And he says, it's okay. I think Leslie would want you to have it. And I can't even... That scene where Leslie's died and he's so upset and she had gotten him this beautiful paint set with watercolors and paper and like real paper.
Yeah.
And he's so mad and he throws it all in the stream. Mm-hmm. And he's just like so...
He's going the different channels of grief, right?
Yeah,
like he's in anger and he just throws them all in. And in the movie, it's done a little bit differently. He like starts squirting the paint.
And it looks so beautiful.
It does actually look really beautiful.
So beautiful.
And then he sees like the evil dark, what do they call the dark master?
Yeah.
And he starts running after them and then he's hearing these jingles and then he like falls to the ground and it's his dad. Also, that relationship in the book and in the movie is such a... In the movie, you see it more. It's more visual, where there's just a constant underlining of like he wants to be loved by his father the way the father loves the daughters. And you just don't get that. Like you can see him just wanting his dad to look at him the way he does look at the daughters, the way he like tucks the daughters in at night and then just like says goodnight to him. Like there's this whole like structure of just craving that love and attention from his father. And not that his father is a bad man or abusive or he's really not even mean. He's just a normal guy
who's overworked, who's underpaid,
exactly,
stressed about taking care of his family,
tired. Everything, like there's literally, and in the movie, I like the fact that they kind of did that whole sneakers scene where, like, obviously Jesse really needs a new pair of sneakers, and his mom's like, oh, but these are a perfectly good pair of your sister's sneakers, but they have like pink detail. And the mom and the dad kind of go to the side, and like the dad's like, no, he really needs a new pair of sneakers. And she's like, we cannot afford it. And you see like that moment of like, he wants to be able to give for his son, but his son doesn't ask for anything. Whereas the daughters are so demanding and so like needy.
In the book, the older sisters, they just suck.
They're just the worst.
They're the worst.
And he's so quiet and so quiet
and just does what he's told. And the dad's face knowing that he's about to send his son to school with pink sneakers.
Yeah.
And he's going to get made fun of relentlessly. Mm-hmm. And Jess goes and gets a marker and tries to color it in, but then he gets wet on the way to school and the marker washes off. Like, it's just...
There's just so many things.
So many things.
But I think, like, so to round it back to the scene where he's running from who he thinks is the Dark Master, but it turns out to be his father. That scene, for me, was such an emotional... Ooh. Because he basically, like, you see Jesse's inner fears and worries and thoughts about Leslie and how he thinks it's his fault. I was like, okay, well, this has been fun. But he just keeps reiterating to Jesse, like, buddy, it's not your fault. Like, when you did not cause this. Oh my God. He's like, God would never send that sweet little girl
to hell.
I'm just like, I can't. It was beautiful because you can see the dad loves him so, so, so much. But it's the first, like, you kind of see it right after, obviously, he finds out about the death. There's a definite level of, like, him really making sure his son is okay. I think because he knows he needs that. Whereas, for the most part, his son is okay. Like, he can handle life, even though Jesse wants that attention and wants his dad to be that person for him. He knows he's okay, but in this moment, he knows he's not okay. And he's just, I was like, I can't.
There is something to be said about all of the relationships in this book, right? Like, she does such a great job of creating them. You brought it up a little bit, and I do just want to go back to it, the casting for this movie. So first of all, it was directed by Gabor Supo. I don't know how to say his last name.
Great.
And the screenplay obviously was written by David Patterson, the author's son. But our little boy Josh Hutcherson from Peter Malark, our little Peter Malark.
It's like perfection.
They said when they were casting him, they really needed somebody who would have character growth and could go from being this like morose little boy to an imaginative, interactive, sweet, sweet boy who you just fall in love with immediately.
Yeah.
And that is I mean, you could not have cast someone more perfect.
Brown hair, brown-eyed boy.
A little chicken nugget. And my favorite is Anna Sophia Robb, who plays Leslie Burke. She wrote the director a letter, and he said it was such a beautiful, heartwarming letter that expressed her love for the book and the character. And that he cast her because her enthusiasm and love of the material, but also that he had a conversation with her and she was already so imaginative and excited. And he's like, that's Leslie. She's already doing to me what this character does for Jesse.
Yeah.
But then little sweet freaking baby Angel Maybell cast Bailey Madison. I mean, that little face.
I can't.
What? A little chicken nugget.
Like all your baby making parts are like, whoa!
And she was the cute little thing. And I feel like so many. And I can't even think of what she was in.
She's in that show, Good Witches or whatever, too. She's older. She's not little like that. But yeah, she's been in so many things.
But I remembered her from, she's Little Snow White in Once Upon a Time.
Yeah.
But I thought she was just perfect.
She was
so precious.
Literally, like all her little
precious.
face. She does a lot of face stuff in the movie, and she just nails it. She nails it so good.
The Twinkie scene,
the scene when she's on the bus and she like looks. She goes to like the side of the bus or to the side of the seat, and she looks at Leslie and Jesse, and she's like, did you do that? Did you do that? And they're like, yeah. She's like. And she gets so excited. She sits down in her little seat.
She's so
She's
cute.
great.
But you want to know what's so funny is like I'm thinking about this movie. And so I don't know, you didn't read it in school, but I did have to read it in school. And we watched, there's like a version of a movie made for TV from the 80s.
Yeah.
And that's what we watched in school. And I'd watched it a few times since then. But when they redid it into this version, Mr. Gabor here, whose last name I can't pronounce. Oh, it's Chupo. Okay. I just looked it up. He's from Hungary. It's Gabor Chupo.
Oh.
He already did such a good job with his imagination because he is the director of Rugrats.
Oh, yeah.
Duckman, Our Real Monsters, The Wild Thornberrys, Rocket Power, the Rugrats movie. Like all of these, he did a little thing on The Simpsons.
Mm-hmm.
He did so much stuff from our childhood. And he said he really thought it was important that things looked as they are. But what happens in a little kid's brain, right? You're looking at the tree in the woods. And I mean, he did it so perfectly.
It's exactly how you would envision it.
And then all of a sudden there's like two holes where just the branches are sparse, but it almost looks like eyes.
Yeah.
And then very slowly you just watch their little brains turn it into a giant monster in the woods. And those are the eyes. And the way that they did it, it was not overdone.
No.
It wasn't corny.
Mm-mm.
It was perfect. And you had texted me when you were reading this and you said, this is such a beautiful, imaginative adventure story.
Yes.
And I never thought about it like that, but it is a perfect childhood imagination adventure story.
The words are so elegantly, like the way she describes stuff, like the way the author has these characters talk and envision things is just so elegant and beautiful and just like
accurate.
It's so true to that inner child who can imagine these just insane worlds and like build these tree houses that if we were to look at them, they just look like a bunch of boxes thrown together. But to these kids, it's an entire universe.
And so back to the cocktail that we have for this, the poetry of the trees, that's actually an exact line from her son, David, who he had said to her once he also liked to draw. And she said something about why aren't you drawing this, whatever it was. And he said, I just can't get the poetry of the trees right.
I love it.
And so she took that line and put that in for him because Leslie says, why aren't you drawing the trees? And he says, I just can't get the poetry of the trees right. And I do just want to read a part from, let me find my phone here. Okay, so in her acceptance speech for the Newbery Prize, she talks about why she named it this.
Yeah.
And her son, David, who this is written for, was obsessed with bridges. And she must be a New York or Vermont girl, I think, because they talk about driving to visit family in Long Island and how they're going all over all these bridges. And he was 3 and he was like, just one more bridge, mommy, just one more bridge. And she was like, honey, there are no more bridges.
Yeah.
And he was super upset and crying, like, how come you can't make me a bridge, mommy? Just one more bridge, just one more bridge. And she's like, we were in Long Island. Like, there's no more bridges once you get into Long Island. We're done. And he's like losing it. And then he started to cry. And she said there's nothing that they could do to console him. And then she said that there's no way I could conjure a bridge up and throw it in the path of our car. When would he know that I was just a human being and devoid of all the magical powers that they thought that parents had? She said it was later that night that I remembered the next day I could give him a bridge, and not just any bridge. The next day I could give him the Verrazano Bridge, which if you're a New Yorker, it's a great bridge.
That's great.
And she said, this is the first and last time I was ever given credit for building the Verrazano Bridge. But she said, it occurs to me that I spent a good part of my life trying to construct bridges between people. And she said, usually my bridges turn out looking much more like the bridge that he built in Terabithia.
Yeah.
But just this one day, I got to build the Verrazano Bridge because the next day, the little kid, her son thought that she built the Verrazano Bridge for him.
That's incredible. I love that. That's a really sweet, I like that a lot.
And when she wrote this, she just wrote this for her son and for herself to get through this grief and for her husband. And when she sent it off to her editor, she was like, I didn't even think about it. I put pen to paper. Like, I think it took her a couple times, but she did it. And she they were like, we can do this. No one's going to believe a kid gets struck by lightning. Even though that's what really happened.
Yeah.
She's like, that's not believable. Nobody's going to believe it. So that is why she has her go across this rope swing.
Right. And the rope
like
breaks.
In the movie, it's just that the rope breaks and he thinks she drowned. And he's like, how is that possible? She's such a good swimmer.
Yeah.
But in the book, I'm sorry, vice versa. In the book, they think she drowned. She's such a good swimmer. But in the movie, they say they think she hit her head on a rock.
Your friend Leslie's dead. She drowned in a creek this morning. Apparently, she tried to swing across on a rope and it broke. They think she hit her head.
No, it's not that kind of rope. It couldn't break. It wouldn't have.
But it did. I'm sorry, son.
No, you're lying. She's not even dead. You're lying. Jess!
Again, I get why people are like, this is too dark for children, but it's real life.
But I think,
it's important.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to have conversations around it, because then if, God forbid, something like that happens in their life, they're prepared to feel these really big feelings, and it's not scary for them, because that's a big part of it. There's so much fear when there's a death, because you don't understand it, you can't make sense of it, and no one will talk to you because you're a child and you don't understand anyway.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's not fair, because that child feels a whole lot more than like we understand. So like to not include them in that process,
awful. No. And there's also like a moment where I feel like we haven't talked about Leslie enough, but like, did you have a kid in your life? Like, I know you went to a much smaller school district than I did. But that kid that you meet and they're just a little bit quirky and eccentric, but they're everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're just like, oh my God, I just want to be just like them.
Yeah.
Like, I wish I could be like they are. And I think that's what Leslie was to Jessie. And
yes,
there's something so realistic to that, something that I think every kid has gone through, having the envy of another child. And not only were gender roles kind of explored really well in this, but also classist. You know, like, he's very poor. They're very wealthy.
Yeah.
And it does not freaking matter. He goes to their house. They don't have a TV. There's no furniture.
Yeah.
They paint the gold room.
Well, and that's even brought up
Nothing in it.
in the movie, like when because she gives him the gift on the bus, and he's like, oh, wow, these must have been really expensive, or how much did you pay for these? And she's like, why does that matter?
She said, I can return them and get a cheaper one.
Yeah,
who cares?
Yeah, right? Like, that's not, and I think like that's a really sweet moment too, because it really shows that like she's not thinking about that because she has, right? Where all he thinks about is how much things are because he has none. And it's just, I love it. Anyway, to make a happier note, to just throw this out there.
Is there a happier note?
Yeah, this is like a super random thing that I found. And I was
Awesome.
like, oh, this is kind of fascinating. So apparently there was a musical stage adaptation of this made.
What?
And it's available for purchase on stageplays.com. It's supported by a lyrical score. It's entitled The Bridge to Terabithia, and you can buy it right now. So we should make a musical.
I don't know if my emotions can handle it right now, because the crying that I've done in the past 3 days.
What are the odds of all the things to turn into a musical? But it's never been done. I'm assuming no one's purchased it because it's still available for purchase. But how fun is that?
I do want to say too, for this story, if you are a parent, and this is, I'm throwing this to you, what age do you think is appropriate for a kid to read this? Because again, I was kind of like I probably read this way earlier than I should have. I think I read it in 3rd grade, but I remember we read it in school in 4th or 5th grade. But like, what age do you think?
I think that's a really hard question. And I think that should be a question for any parent, because your kid is going to be different from another kid. Right?
Yeah, that's true.
So like the emotional intelligence of my kid as opposed to another kid the same age might not be the same. For my kid, reading it earlier would be fine because we do talk about this stuff. But I think sometimes if you give a kid something like this, it might be really heavy and they're not ready for those feelings. But with that being
Isn't that
said,
important though, right?
Exactly. I think
Maybe they don't have a house that they talk about these things.
Right. And I think what's funny and interesting about this, there's a little tie-in to a modern thing that's just released in theaters, not a book, but something that's worth talking or mentioning, feelings, the movie Inside Out. So
Yeah, absolutely.
Inside Out really like touches on those feelings that kids don't understand or don't know why they're feeling the way they're feeling, and that process. Now, the new movie that just came out is a real tearjerker, really just gets you in the gut with emotions. But I think it's such a beautiful way for kids to start processing those feelings.
Yeah.
When they start seeing things like that, it helps them to understand, like, oh, this is normal. It's okay to feel this way, to feel really angry or really sad or really frustrated or all this stuff. Kids don't understand what those feelings are. They don't. We have a hard time figuring out our feelings sometimes. So I think like it's so important for kids to see that, like, also as adults, parents, we're human and we have feelings. So crying in front of your kid, talking about hard things with your kid. There's so much that we try to shield our kids from, but the downside to that is then our kids don't understand what they're feeling when they're feeling it, because they're used to seeing, but mommy doesn't cry when this happens, or daddy doesn't get angry when this happens, or this happens and nothing. You know, like it's when it comes to like the financial stuff or not letting your kid be a kid, I think there is like a fine line there. But when it comes to emotions, I think it's so important.
I agree. And I'm going through that with my niece right now. Like, she's 4, and when I reprimand her for doing something, like, hey, you can't do that. You can't do that. And she'll say, are you mad at me? Do you still love me?
Yeah.
Because she's starting to understand what anger is and what frustration is. And it's just like breaks my freaking heart. I'm like, no, I could never. I love you more than my life itself. Like, you're the most important tiny little human in the universe. Like, of course I love you.
Yeah.
And I'm not mad at you, and you can be frustrated. And like, I've been so, I don't have children, obviously, but just take my sisters like they are mine. And I say, like, it's okay to be frustrated. It's good to have big feelings. Yeah. Big feelings are big. Like, you can have big happy feelings and big sad feelings and big frustrated feelings. Mm-hmm. And it's okay to express those, but we can't hit people when we're upset and we can't do, you know what I mean? Like,
it's expressing in healthy ways.
Yeah. And like just being so different. And like our parents did such a different way than their parents did. Like, you've just got to be better than the last generation. And my mom was a big, you can cry mom, like, like a very safe place. My dad was a very safe place for those things. Mm-hmm. It wasn't a hide your emotions family, but their society did tell you can't do those things. And I really love watching these emotionally intelligent, tiny humans that are out in the world now that are just, it's beautiful. And I think, kind of just to piggyback what you're saying, that's why books like this are important and they can't be banned. And the minute you see a book get banned on a list for anything, go out and freaking buy it, because there's something important in there that you need to know.
Yeah.
And this is one of them. And this gets banned all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
And I think it's important to also say, like, as a parent, you have the right to choose what you want your kid to see.
100%. Right? Absolutely.
But I don't think anybody should have the right to say to anybody they can't because they feel it's not okay.
Yep.
That's not how it works. I'm going to parent differently than the next person. And that's okay for me. It might not be okay for you, but that's okay.
And that is the beauty of books like this, though.
Exactly.
It's so beautiful that, like, you get 2 completely different families.
Exactly.
Who, guess what, are going through the same thing in different ways.
Yeah.
And if you haven't read Bridge to Terabithia in a long time, you read it in school or you haven't read it, it's a short read. We're talking like 178 pages, I think it is.
Yeah.
Read it. It's just, number one, it brings you back to that
so that's the
happy
question.
thing. Well, that's what I'm going to say. Like, it brings you back to a happy time in your childhood when it was fun to imagine. But watch it and read it. Like, I think you need to do both.
Mm-hmm.
I think that if you did one or the other, that's fine, but revisit the other.
Yes.
Is that fair to say?
100%.
So, the words, you brought it up, but the words that she uses in this book, she's a literary hero. Like,
yes,
to create such a safe space for children for the past 50 years, mm-hmm. and this book is still relevant and kids are still reading it. I went to borrow it on Libby, which is, if you've not used Libby, folks, it is a free, you put your library card in and you can download audiobooks and regular books straight to your Kindle or e-readers or read it on your phone. It is free. You just use your library card. Support your local libraries, folks. I went to download this. Has a 5-month wait at the New York Public Library. My local library in the Catskills, where you grew up, 2-month wait.
That's wild.
Like, this is still such an important book, and people are still reading it and digesting it. So I'm saying both.
Agreed. Both.
Okay.
Hands down, both. And it doesn't matter the order. You can do it in either order.
A good cry, ladies and gents.
Yes.
Just buckle up because
it's there. It is there. It'll get you. It'll get you.
On that note, folks, head over to social media and follow us. And eventually all these videos of Amanda and Dayelle hysterically crying, staring at each other in the studio will be up.
Yes.
Follow us on TikTok and over on Instagram and Facebook if you are our parents.
Yeah.
We're eventually going to be throwing stuff up on Patreon, so we'll let you know when that's live. But again, like always, tag us in your pictures. And please, if you're making the cocktails, let us know. Give us suggestions. Interact with our stuff. But head over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Amazon, or Google.
Anywhere
that you listen to your podcast. And if you guys could just subscribe and give us a little like and a follow and a rating, we really appreciate it.
Love it.
We like to feel like we have friends that read with us and that cry with us and don't think we're weird for sobbing. We'll talk about children's books.
Children's books.
Okay.
Bye.
Our editor is Katie Yonner. Our associate producer is Grace Heerman. Our production coordinator is Nicole Vargas. And our senior content producer is Kyle Bosch. Our executive producer is Tommy West. And Watch It or Read It is produced by Gotham West Studios.